Most insane ancient drugs that got your ancestors high. Turns out they got way higher than you ever did by abusing hard drugs. Good old weed, or cannabis if you're refined like that. This stuff was widely used by the Chinese who discovered it over 4,000 years ago and used it for recreational purposes, which apparently meant chewing on the stuff straight up. I mean, these guys were eating weed raw like a stick of celery. You gotta respect that. Cannabis was eventually spread along the Silk Road and eventually known to the Romans as cannabion, scoinostrophon, and asterion. But the silly geese that they didn't smoke any of the good stuff or even chew on it either. They were really missing out. And instead, they wasted perfectly good weed by making it into ropes, mosquito repellent, and used it for decreasing sexual activity for whatever reason. Why? Just why? Reportedly, though, they also served it in small cakes for dessert. Yes, Caesar was eating weed cakes. And who knew it was the Romans who invented weed brownies? Some of the more astute philosophers of the time, like Pliny the Elder, believed that cannabis could heal a whole number of things. One was that it could treat gonorrhea, of all things, since it caused a slightly warm feeling in the body. Great job, guys. Nailed that one. He also claimed that its seed is said to make genitals impotent and that the juice could drive worms out from your ears or, any other pesky creatures that might have snuck their way in there. He also thought that a tea made of cannabis could help cure farm animals of indigestion, gout, arthritis, and lots of other different things. Yeah, he's alright. Inhalin Galen the physician, though, was the first to use cannabis for its, to be medically correct, mood-enhancing properties. Now this was a guy that got it. Truly enlightened. Now Herodotus, the famous Roman historian, claimed that the Scythians, a nomadic warrior tribe, would smoke ganja by sitting in a tent filled with the smoke. They would take cannabis seeds and throw them over red-hot coals, sitting in this vapor bath and howling with delight at getting clean, since, in his words, they never ever take showers. This was the OG hotboxing, a marijuana sauna, if you will. I'm trademarking that, and I'm trying to hang out with some Scythians. The Dreamfish. So the Romans also apparently had a thing for eating a certain hallucinogenic fish, elegantly called the Dreamfish. It's a type of sea bream found in the Mediterranean Sea, and since it stuffs its gullet with so much garbage from the seafloor, well, actually it's algae from seaweed, its flesh is filled with a hallucinogenic neurotoxin. And the Romans, who are a glass half full type of people, decided it would be perfectly safe to eat anyways. So if you ever find yourself gnawing on a dreamfish, you will go on a magic mushroom type trip for almost a week with hallucinations of anything from screaming humans, squawking birds, and plenty of vomiting. So bad and for so long that you think you're developing a mental illness. Just that chill kind of high that I love. Scientists think the active ingredient could be the same thing that's in DMT. Now, one brave reporter who ate a dreamfish for Nat Geo described that he experienced intense hallucinations with a science fiction theme that included futuristic vehicles, images of space exploration, and monuments marking humanity's first trips into space. Jeez, man. Now, mind you, this was in 1960, before the first human had even entered space. It's actually nice to know that all of human progress and civilization ever was due to a drug-filled fish. I can now see why the Romans were able to make things that we can't replicate today, like Roman concrete and Greek fire. Now, it wasn't ancient aliens, but it was by eating a fish, getting as high as a kite, and literally looking into the future. Be right back. I'm gonna go on a fishing trip. Am I right, guys? Yeah, Ergot. You ever take a bite of some bread, get delirious for a couple days, hallucinate intensely, and then get seizures, feel okay for a bit, and then suddenly die from your own flesh rotting off? That's really relatable, actually. Ergot is actually a fungus that infects grains like rye that are used to make flour and bread. It infects grains, grows a literal mushroom out of them, and then just patiently waits to be turned into flour, baked into bread, and eaten by some unfortunate souls. So whole communities and villages would actually get crazy high off of a bad batch of bread. And this actually happened quite a bit in ancient times, likely mostly by accident, but I'm sure there were some experimental souls out there. These people would purposefully eat the fungus in mild amounts, sometimes causing hallucinations like magic mushrooms. However, most of the time, they would get ergotism, which sounds like a sort of philosophical school of thought, but instead of profound thoughts coming from the mind, some profound diarrhea was coming out of your bottom. It also caused nausea, gangrene, and paranoia. When ergotism spread throughout villages back in the day, the people would call it St. Anthony's fire after the burning sensation that came with it. It's actually speculated that the mass hallucinations and hysteria that came with eating the contaminated bread may have actually caused the Salem witch trials, where people falsely believed that there were witches in their midst. Which actually kind of made sense when you think about it, because people who were suffering from ergotism had sensations of pinching or burning of the skin, odd contortions, speaking in tongues, also known as talking magic, and literal attempts at human flight. They were also literally all hallucinating, and so people really started to accuse each other of being witches. Now, I'm not defending witch hunting. All I'm saying is, if I was hallucinating and I saw Eleanor, who now looks warty as hell, say a few magic words and take off in flight, I'd be screaming witch too. Now, it's not crazy to think that this might have happened just a couple of times during an ergot outbreak. Hey man. No, you're a witch. Maybe most mind-bogglingly, this drug, after people were fully aware of what it did, was used to induce labor. I mean, I guess the uncontrollable twitching and convulsing could help shake the baby out a little bit, but unsurprisingly, many deaths occurred due to uterine rupture, and this practice stopped in 1828. In the 1930s, two scientists attempted to isolate the toxic alkaloids found in ergot in hopes of finding a cure for psychosis. Instead, they created a drug that made these symptoms worse in patients already suffering from psychosis and caused those who were considered healthy to get psychosis. This drug is now known as LSD, and it's still made the same way. Be right back. I'm going to make some bread and leave it out for a few weeks. Actually, I don't really want to try this one. Mad honey. You ever eat some honey, get so sluggish that you can't stand up, start having uncontrollable diarrhea, and have your heart just stop? Well, the drug-loving addicts they are, the Romans sure did, as well as the Turks and Nepalese. Mad honey is honey that comes from the flowers of rhododendrons, and the mad refers to the crazy things that happen when you eat it. In the right doses, this honey causes a euphoric and pleasant feeling, and maybe just a teensy little bit of vomiting as well, but in large doses, however, or 1 more gram than a small dose, it literally became a biological weapon. The ancient Turks used mad honey as a weapon against the Romans, leaving behind some tasty honeycombs for the Roman soldiers to find and eat when they fled a village, which they promptly did after finding them and plucking them from the ground, leaving them vomiting and shaking and easily defeated in an ambush attack. Alright men, we're gonna find them, and when you do find them, we're gonna I mean, dude, who's eating honey off of the ground? Were all Romans just Winnie the Pooh? In the year 946, Queen Olga of Kiev sent several tons of mad honey to her Russian foes, who, by the way, knew it was from her, decided to eat it anyways, and were massacred as they were unable to move from the honey's effects. And what's even more mad about this honey is the lengths that people will still go to get some of it. In about 2 weeks out of the year, some villagers in Nepal will drive for hours, climb a flimsy ladder rope about 200 feet off of a cliff above a giant chasm surrounded by massive bees, cave bats, vampire bats, and man bats just to lop off a semicircle of this stuff. If you're eating honey off the ground, eating it when your sworn enemies are sending it directly to you and risking life to harvest some of it, then this honey's gotta be pretty good. Opium. Opium is found in the sap that comes from this little ball part under the poppy flower and is used to relax and kill pain. People started using opium as early as 8,000 years ago when doctors were prescribing opium on clay tablets, which were literally just drawings of a guy holding some opium pods. HIV, gonorrhea, and an axe wound, huh? Yeah, just take 2 of these and call me in the morning. What's a good pharmacy? I mean, dudes were huffing this stuff before even trying to develop a writing system. But as usual, the Romans also abused this drug hardcore. Opium in the form of wine, leaves, and small tablets could be purchased from stalls in marketplaces, aka ancient Roman dispensaries. Now the more enlightened among them wasted no time and poured the sap straight up on their heads, because why waste time processing the sap into a usable form of the drug when you can just dump the stuff on you and then absorb it through your eyes and ears and stuff? These guys loved opium so much that they dedicated murals and statuettes to the thing. Archaeologists have found ancient flasks in Egypt and the Middle East in the same shape as poppy flowers, and upon further inspection found there to be opium inside. They were making drug-shaped containers, well, for their drugs, obviously. This right here is a decorative statue called a poppy goddess that the Greeks made out of sheer love for the drug. Imagine how good this stuff must be if people loved it on the same level as Jesus, thinking, liberty, or just naked guys. Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor, used opium multiple times a day to alleviate chest and stomach discomfort while at war. Ah, yes, Marcus, numb the pain. Numb it until you have no sensations whatsoever. Undoubtedly, huffing opium and completely frying his feelings is the reason why Marcus became the OG Stoic. Oh man, I gotta write this down. Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one. And take opium.